Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast, where we help people to combat the negativity that inundates their daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Sue Corl. Sue is an international women's conference speaker, author, mentor, Bible teacher, crew missionary, founder, and director of Crown of Beauty International, and His Heartbeat podcast host and teacher. Man, she's busy. Her greatest joy is being a wife and mother of two adult children. She has a passion to see women set free to live in the powerful truths of who they are in Christ and the love of God. She served as a missionary for 25 years in Asia, and currently she travels to minister to women throughout Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, and the U.S. Sue has a Master's of Education from the University of Hawaii and a Master's of Christian Counseling from Philadelphia Biblical University. She is also the author of several books, including Crown of Beauty, 12-Week Bible Study, For Such a Time as This, and Broken But Not Undefeated. So please welcome to the show, Sue Corl. Sue, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
Sure, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Well, you went from one coast to the other to get your education. I mean, to one end
That's
to the
true.
other. It's like, that's great. But tell us about you and how you got to where you are.
Oh boy, that okay, got to do this short, right?
Yeah.
I've written a whole book about this. Yeah, well, it goes back to my beginning. Okay, when I was born with a very severe cleft palate, and I was in the hospital for off and on every year for 15 years, had 26 surgeries. From birth, they had given up on me. So talk about the negativity. Boy, even doctors were told my mom at 3 weeks, take her home to die. And my mother is a very positive person, and she also is a pediatric nurse
Ah,
at that very hospital. And she said, well, I'll take her home, but not to die. And she figured out a way. She kind of made some crazy contraption to get a big mask on my face to be able to suck because I had no nose, upper palate, no upper palate, no upper lip. I mean, I only have an upper palate, but no palate, no upper lip. I had all kinds of trachea problems.
wow.
So, yeah, it was very severe. And at that, I'm a little older. So at that time, no child had lived with that severity. But the surgeon that was the number one in the country at that time for cleft palates was at the hospital where my mom worked.
Wow.
So after she got me back to strength at 3 months, she brought me back. He still thought I would die on the operating table, but because she had done such a good job and she had faith, she believed that God had really, through when she prayed, made it clear that this baby's going to live and I have a special purpose for her. And so I survived that heroin surgery, I suppose. And
Yeah.
it was rough throughout my childhood in that not as much, well, physically, obviously, but also emotionally because I was teased a lot. And I had 11 years of speech therapy, and here I am, a public speaker.
You
Before
showed them.
17 years, I was a worship leader, but for that, a podcaster, it's wonderful what God can do. So as I got older, I discovered that all those wounds from my childhood of being told all the time that, you can't amount to anything, you're insignificant, it'd be better if you died, just crazy stuff like that, that people say that you're ugly, that no one can love you, you're rejectable. And I had heard that so much, Bob, despite my mom every day affirming me. I mean, that helped me with women, but with guys, you're a guy, you guys are funny, you love sarcasm, you love to tease. And so I took that very seriously. I didn't just take it as a joke, and it became my identity. So even after I graduated from college, and at that point, I had for 4 years had come into the Christian faith. My mother was a Christian, my dad was not, and my mom had to work on weekends, so I didn't get to go to church. And in high school is when I began that faith through youth group. And so I got involved a little bit with a group at that time called Campus Crusade for Christ, that's now called Crew, and
Okay.
went on a trip to the Philippines. That's where I think I got my desire to be overseas. It was so, so exciting, Bob. I was like, wow, I'm just this college kid, but I was able to, we were showing Jesus film, this movie. And we would literally have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people come from, we were in villages, we were like with cave dwellers, we were all over the place. And even I'm on like a jeepney with pigs and people, and people are asking me about God, it's just really cool. And I thought, wow, this is an exciting life. I want to do this. And I really enjoyed sharing about my faith because it had meant so much to me. And as I got more into it, eventually I was in Hawaii first. That's where University of Hawaii was, for 9 years doing youth work. But I started working a lot with mainland Chinese, helping them in English as second language. That's when I got that degree at University of Hawaii. And I decided to go to China. So once I went, I can say I almost left. I did leave to get married. I met my husband over there, and I did go to Philippines for 2 years and 1 year in Hong Kong, which now is a part of China, but that time wasn't, and then back to China. So I loved being there. But what I found, Bob, is that the folks there, they're lovely. They really are, but they had such a negative view of themselves. And I think part of it comes because it's a shame culture, and the way that you motivate people is through shaming words. So I even experienced that when I went to language classes for 1.5 years. I was studying Chinese, and the teacher, she wouldn't, when she passed out our paper, she wouldn't say to the A student, good job. She would say to the worst student, which happened to be me, many times, not all the time, but she would say to us, hey, you did horrible. And she'd write our grades up on the front board and say, you should be like this person, who was always my roommate. And you should work harder. Well, she hardly studied, and I studied my brains out. Language was not an easy thing for me. And I quickly learned what the base of people's self-esteem was coming from. So I started meeting with women. That's when I would come back in the summer and get my counseling degree. And I started meeting with women there. And across the board, I had developed this list of lies that we tend to believe about ourselves, about 30 lies, typical common lies. And they would check off, Bob, like 26 of them. I mean, or they look and go, all of them. At the least, it would be about 10. And I talked to them about their childhood, and you really find that, like myself, it was rooted in these wounds of the past. So I began to talk to them about how we are created in the image of God. I mean, even for you listeners that are, not sure where you stand in faith, I'm sure your image of God, well, you might think he's mean, which is a lie, by the way. He's incredibly loving and caring and very forgiving and accepting. But I'm sure that you would think that he is beautiful, that he's talented, that he's smart, that he is creative, all these things. And he says we are image bearers, meaning he has given us to mirror him, like a replica, which means that every single person has incredible potential. And what we need to do is begin to identify what are these lies that we've heard from our childhood, and reject those, and then take on what's actually true, that we're valuable, that we're important, that we have incredible potential, that we have purpose on this earth, that we're lovable, that we're beautiful, and you're just handsome, right, Bob? Yeah. So that's what I'm all about.
Wow. And that's so enlightening in today's times. We need that. We need to remember. I always appreciate what they say about the Bible. It says, fear not, 365 times within the Bible. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. But we need that daily reminder that says our goodness is with God. It's definitely a plus that you're helping that. It's interesting that you saw the root of how these people were raised. And what are some of those things on that list, some of those questions that maybe you can divulge to people? Because I'm sure there's people that think these, that have these in their head, and we've got to get those out of their head. Just, can you give us like 3 or 4 of those?
I can. So for women, our ministry is called Crown of Beauty International. And so for women, the number one lie that we find is that I'm not beautiful. Women really have that longing in their heart. And for men, we have the counterpart called More Than Conquerors. And for men, the most common is I'm not good enough. And so for men constantly, right, Bob, you're seeking that approval from your dad that you're good enough, that he believes in you. He thinks you did a great job. For women, we want that affirmation from men and women that we're beautiful, that we're not rejectable, that we're lovable. Those would be, I think, the most common. What do you think of that, Bob, from my men's point of view?
Well, no, I definitely understand it. It's, I think part of it stems from the idea that we definitely need to be, if you will, anchored in God's love, because we're not going to get that support from other people. As you found, okay, if we're putting our belief in our fathers, our earthly fathers, and that's not a great person, or we put it in our friends or what we think others are thinking of us, we're playing a movie over in our head that may not be true. We need to be solid in our own belief in who we are, and knowing that, I think you touched on it, that we're images of God. We have the capabilities of great things with our faith, with our actions. And you're doing a great job, I think, in helping solidify that with people so that they can grow, so they can live a fun life, an exciting life that God offers. I definitely understand what you're saying. And yeah, there's very much some truth to that because of our mortal mindset, if you will.
Yeah, and you brought up the word our Father here on earth, right?
Yeah.
And that's amazingly key. And I didn't realize that for a long time. I remember being back in Hawaii, and my director brought in this article, and it talked about how our view of God really comes from our view of our earthly father, first and foremost. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. No, my dad had divorced my mom. He left us. He's a wonderful man now, but in his earlier days, he made some mistakes, and that, well, obviously we were abandoned by him. But what's really interesting is a few years, probably about 3 years after my director had shared that, I'm in China by myself. Okay. I joined a group of teachers, a teacher association, and I was with them. And actually my best friend came with me from Hawaii. So that was wonderful. But she fell in love with one of the teachers, and then I hardly saw her.
Yeah.
And I felt so abandoned, not so much from her. I understood that. I wanted a guy too, but from God, because I thought I gave up my family for this, because I felt that God was telling me to go to China. That's another story that has a history, but I felt clearly about that. And I get there, and all the people I'm working with are there for a year, and they leave, or they start dating somebody, or
the wheels fell off the cart.
Whatever. And there I am in the world of hardly any English speakers back then, and no opportunity to meet a guy. I'm already 31 when I got there, thinking that, oh, God's taking me there. He's going to bring Prince Charming, right? And it didn't happen at first. It did happen at the end of the second year, but impatiently, I became angry at God, and really I felt like God had forgotten me. He left me. I felt so deserted and abandoned. Well, where does that come from? Ding, 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 ding. Look
Wow.
back,
Yeah.
right? It was incredible, the parallel. So when I started doing counseling, the first question I asked people, Bob, is tell me about your family. Not now, but your childhood. Tell me what that was like. And what you hear is that it's really hard to get over or past that image you have of a father, from your own father. So if he was incredibly loving, my dad was incredibly, and is still incredibly loving. And so I never had trouble believing that God is loving. But I did think that maybe he abandoned me because he found people who needed more help than me, kind of thing. This crazy to try to make sense of it, right? Or maybe I made such a big mistake in my youth that that God said, no, I can't, I'm enough of you, you know, like that kind of thing. And so if you have parents that were really harsh, then it's easily transferred to God, that God is harsh, that when I make a mistake, when I sin, that now God is really ticked off. He's so mad at me, and I bet he could never forgive me. I don't know if I'll get in heaven. You know, I'm not good enough to be a Christian, or I don't want to be because he's too harsh. And
Right.
it's just not true. You know, he's so not harsh that he took the sin and shame on himself and died
Right.
on the cross for us, right? That's how not harsh he is. He's like, hey, I got this. I'm going to actually pay punish for you so you don't have to be. You know,
Right.
that's how much. Like, would we do that for our kids?
Well,
I
yeah,
might. I love my
yeah,
kids much, but you get, you know, you see what I'm saying? And so one of the things we deal with in our conferences, which we call Beauty for Ashes, first we talk about the lies about self, but then we talk about the lies about God,
right,
and how this often goes back to trauma or to struggles in our own past. And then it's now current, right? Now when we
right,
have a situation that mirrors what we felt, not, it might be a completely different situation, but it
right,
mirrors the emotions we felt. It brings all those false beliefs back. And so we want to go into what does the Bible say about God, because it is truer than our feelings. Our
right,
feelings, when we stand on truth, it brings freedom. It even says that, the Apostle John says that. Well, Jesus said it, but he wrote it. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
right,
And so we walk in that truth, and the feelings will follow, which is nice. It takes time. Maybe we feel like, oh, he's really mad at me, but then he says, as far as the east is from the west, so much have I forgiven you, and I've forgotten that sin. You know, just tell him I'm sorry, and then we move on. And I stand on that truth. And at first I might, because of my past, I might still feel like, or because I just carry a lot of shame in what I did, I might really carry that, but I just keep renewing my mind and saying no. But the truth is, he says, as far as the east is from the west, and that he's made me whiter than snow. And I cling to that truth. And as we do that, neurologically,
right, right,
we will literally shift from this thought pattern that goes to chemical release that's negative, okay,
right.
negative feelings, to start creating a new neurological pathway that will take us to a positive side, where it releases positivity of, in that case, probably thankfulness, like, oh, thank
Right.
you, and gratefulness. That's a wonderful feeling, right?
And you bring up some great points and all that, because you talk about when you go back to these feelings with people of their childhood, that's when you're building neural pathways in your mind. And that's why those things keep sticking in your mind, is you can go
Right,
back to that because they're, if you will, embedded into your mind. And like you said, as you get older and realize that connection, you can build new roads. You can't get rid of those in your mind, but you can build new pathways that focus, like you said, on the positive, on the greatness God offers, the goodness, and knowing that you're forgiven, knowing that you're on solid ground, that you have great things, great abilities within you. And it leads, I can imagine these conferences that you go to. I mean, it sounds like it's a scenario where you go back and you're helping people understand that. And what are some key things that might help people to let go of these rocks they're carrying, if you will, so they don't have to continue doing that? I mean, realizing that,
right,
they're great, that they don't need to carry all this weight that they may be carrying from things that happened a long time ago.
right. And, you know, it's a big thing right now to say words of affirmation or positivity. I wake up and I'm a good person. I'm lovable. I'm, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
But there's a way to find greater power in that. I'm not putting that down. That does help. But what I want to say is, uh, taking ourselves through a little deeper process will
Hmm.
help. And so when during our conference, we hold up these cards, these six, I think it's six cards. And the first one says, painful event. So we think, what is this painful event that I'm feeling? You know, what's going on? or I'm experiencing, I should say. Then we go to painful emotion. So painful event leads to painful emotion, and I process that. We
Right.
don't want to move too fast. We don't want to dwell on it like, oh, me, but we
Right.
become aware what emotions you have. Journaling it can help. Talking it through with a close friend that you trust is helpful. Then we think about, and it'll come up. It's good if you go with a friend because they'll hear it. You think about what lies are coming out of that. So, for example, oh, I feel, like that story I share. I feel abandoned. I feel alone. I feel nobody cares. I feel like must be something wrong with me. Well, there's two lies, right? Nobody
Right.
cares. There's something wrong with me. And it'll come up as you process journaling or with a person, these emotions that are coming out of that painful event. And then you think about, what are the protective behaviors I'm moving into? What am I doing to cope, more or
Okay.
less? Coping mechanisms, so am I running to food and I'm gaining masses of weight? Am I just sleeping all the time? Am I becoming a workaholic? That's what I did in Hawaii, to deal with it. It's like you just go from 5 a.m. till 11 at night and crash and do it again the next day. So you never have time to think about how you feel, right? So that's a coping mechanism, right? That's a protective behavior that, from Christian point of view, we would even say is sin, in that we're not trusting God to live our lives. We're trusting in some mechanism of our own. Okay.
Right.
And that leads to bondage. So those are the 5. Okay. Then we're going to go to 2 more wonderful ones. So it was the painful event, painful emotion leads to lies, that leads to protective behaviors, or if you want to say sinful behaviors, it leads to bondage. So then what we need to do is think about, okay, what I like to do is think, does this emotion, looking at them, can I think of a time in my life, in my past, usually childhood, that I felt that same way? Did
Right.
I feel abandoned in my past? Did I feel rejected in my past? And what was going on? What was the painful event? What was the emotions going on? What were the lies I believed at that time? Well, I believed that I had done something wrong. I wasn't good enough for my dad, so he left us, right?
Right.
That was some of the lies. And it's because I wasn't good enough. I guess I wasn't fun enough, or I can't remember all the things I was thinking, but at the time it was very real. And how did I cope with that? I just avoided men, basically. I mean, I still go on a date, but for the most part, I just devoted myself to with helping women.
Right. Right.
Then that becomes a problem, when you
Yeah.
move to my kind of work, you're dealing with men too, right?
Yeah.
And so with them, I then felt those same emotions coming back that I
Yeah.
had from the rejection of childhood, not only from my dad, but it even went into my results of my cleft palate. So as you work through this, then you think, what is the truth? That was
Right.
then. That was
Yeah.
then, Bob. That's the thing. You
You
can be
gotta
free
let go of
now
that.
because you're an adult,
Yeah.
but you're still processing like a kid. And so as I think about it now, I think, well, I'm not rejectable,
Right.
and I'm not alone. Maybe this didn't happen to me. My husband's amazing, but maybe this is coming up because your husband abandoned you, but God did not abandon you,
Right.
and friends did not abandon you, and maybe your family did not abandon you, or your kids didn't. There's people in your life that love you, that believe you're enough, that
Right.
you're special enough, and so I want to begin to claim that truth. But then think about that coping mechanism you did before, right?
Right.
Which was I'll avoid,
Yeah.
right? I'll avoid. So what am I doing now to try to avoid this that's actually making life worse?
And that's
Making
interesting
myself
because
dependent.
you show people how to, I mean, we're human. We're gonna go back to that spot that's comfortable, if you will,
Yeah.
and we continue to do that. So it, with that, I mean, we know Christ has power. How do you think Christ empowers us to get through this? I think you're getting to that, but I want to make sure we touch on that. So,
okay, sure. I'm just trying to be sensitive to those of you who aren't from that Christian faith, but you know, I feel like we have an extra little superpower.
yeah,
Because not only do we say positive words, but our Creator, our God, and Jesus, He says those positive words. So when okay, I can look and I can think, oh yeah, okay, I still have friends. My mom's back there praying for me in America while I'm alone here in China, and I can find some other friends here. But it much more than that is the God who created me. Okay, the one who died for me, the one who loves me more than anyone on this earth and will for eternity.
right,
He adores me. He will never, in fact, it says in Hebrews 13:5, I will never leave you, nor will I ever forsake you. And so I cling to that word. You know, for me, a lot of it was Psalm 139:14, that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Okay, and I know it. And I had to come to that place to say, I'm not rejectable. I'm not ugly. You know, I'm not going to be abandoned from by people because rejected because of how I look, because I am created in the image of God. I'm beautiful. I'm fearfully, wonderfully made. And God, that's how God sees me.
right.
And so even if somebody, you know, gives me, in Hawaii we used to say stink eye, gives me stink eye, you know, or ignores me or whatever, you know, that I can right away go, God, thank you that you are here with me and that you see me as beautiful and special and valuable. And there's just so many scriptures. So pulling those out, Bob, and you know, write them on your refrigerator. That's what we
Right.
teach people. Instead of then when you see it, okay, I don't need to open the fridge and eat this
Right, right.
chocolate cake, but I can feast on the truth that I am beautiful in his eyes. I'm not rejectable. I'm adored. I'm special. The book of Isaiah, the second half from 40 to 66, is packed with many scriptures about the love of God. 1 through 39 is when people were totally rejecting God
Right.
and trying to get him back. But 40 on, they turned back. They didn't become these wonderful followers, but all they did is say, I'm sorry. That's
Right.
it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was worshiping other things besides you. And they turned back him, and boom, he said, comfort, comfort my people. And boom, he just starts, you know, chapter after chapter, just pouring out his love, saying that you're precious and honored in my sight, that I love you, that I hold you like a little sheep tenderly cares right to the heart. You know, all these beautiful verses.
And that's a great reminder for people, being that there's, you know, a solid foundation in the word, in the
Yes.
abilities that we, you know, it's not that we're human beings. We need other people in our lives. I get that and I understand that. But at the same time, that value that God gives us in our lives is a strength, and so very, very solid foundation. So we're going to have ups and downs in our life, and that will get us through it. Knowing that solid foundation will get us through anything. And it really brings some peace of mind.
Yes.
With these tumultuous times we can be in, it can really bring that peace of mind to a lot of people in their personal lives and what goes on. There's such a nice feeling, and I say that lightly, nice feeling, but a great feeling of peace with that, knowing that he's forgiven, that he will love you all the time, and that he's always there with you. I mean, that's something, to have the Holy Spirit there with you. You know, if God is with you, who would be against you? You know, that's what
Yeah.
I thrive on. It's like we've got a great power in a faith in God.
Yeah, but it's so important. Every morning I set my alarm. I think, how much time do I need? I know I need 45 minutes to get ready, eat, walk the dog, and I add an hour.
Wow.
Okay, so I was meeting you at 9. It's right there, 7 o'clock. You know, so because you're right. If I begin my day with my God
Yeah.
and being in the presence of one who loves me more than anyone on this earth, who accepts me more than anyone on this earth, who values me and who has purpose. That's the
Right.
other
Yeah.
thing. He
He's got a
has
plan.
he has a plan. He says in Ephesians 2:10, that's my new favorite right now, that he created me with good works to do, that he
Right.
planned beforehand in advance for me to do. So from my birth, he's already inundated me with the talents, the emotional makeup, the character, the everything, okay,
Right.
in order to accomplish these wonderful things, a part of his plan. And that plan is a beautiful plan. So I think time with him and time, I know more and more people are getting away from the church, sadly, but community, whether it's Bible study, a group of people you regularly meet who are believers, it makes such a difference, y'all. Even if you're not a Christian, you're not a follower, if you've been turned off by Christians, okay, we don't follow Christians, we follow Jesus.
Right.
Okay, because Christians, we all mess up, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
some really bad. And I know someone I love dearly in my family who got so hurt by the church. But I encourage her, but follow Jesus and follow followers of Jesus, and not follow them, but be with them and
Right.
follow Jesus together. You're always welcome to email me, and join a Crown of Beauty 12-week Bible study, or go online and on Amazon and grab that book, because this is what we talk about, Bob, in this book. And we ask those questions that help us kind of unravel our heart. It's
Well,
almost like a self-counseling book.
you're doing a great job here. I mean, you've answered all the questions. I just haven't had a chance to ask them, but let's tell people about that. I mean, where can they find out more about you? Tell us about your website, your book. Tell us where they can get all that information, because I want to make sure they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, please. So it's easy to remember, Crown of Beauty International. Crown of Beauty comes from Isaiah 61:3, that he bestows on us a crown of beauty. So Crown of Beauty International, because we have this ministry all over the world, Asia, Middle East, everywhere. So Crown of Beauty International.com is our website, and on that you can find our podcast, which is called His Heartbeat, or anywhere you can. They're on all the channels, so His Heartbeat, and we talk about a lot of this stuff, how to walk in truth, this kind of thing. And then from there we have a blog that comes out every week. If you go online and type in Amazon, Crown of Beauty Bible study, you'll find it. It's a 12-week study. And then if you type in my name, Sue Corl, Corl, you drop the A, no A in the Coral, you will find all my books. I have several devotions, which you mentioned in the very beginning. One that really relates the devotion to what we're talking about is called More Beautiful by the Day. And it's just a really sweet book that has a lot of fun personal stories, but connects that to verses in the Bible that talk about how God sees us. So I think More Beautiful by the Day, you'd enjoy it. And for the men, it's called More Than Conquerors. It's written by myself and two pastors and a missionary. And so I think you will really enjoy that, guys. There's some guys studies out there that are using that.
Great. Well, Sue, thank you so much for taking the time today, and we'll make sure we put all this in the show notes. Thanks for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. I definitely, you've enlightened my day. Definitely, you feel that love, and thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your beliefs, your value, the value God has given you with our audience. I look forward to hearing more about what you're doing. So, congratulations.
Well,
Keep up
Bob,
the great work.
I don't know if you do this live ever, but if they just see your face, you can tell that you're just a really encouraging guy, and full of love for people. So it's really fun to get to have this conversation with you.
Well, thank you so much, Sue. I appreciate it. You keep up the great work. All right.
Thank you.
All right.